My name is Vidhi Sharma. I'm currently working as a customer solution engineer at Google. And we're going to go ahead and get started. We are almost like a couple of minutes over. But don't worry, we're going to take a little bit more time at the end. So no worry, we're going to get like full 1 hour session. And if you have any question, I'm going to give time in the middle to ask your questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, or we are a small groups at that point. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your questions, feel free to do that as well. Sounds good? You all give me thumbs up with the Zoom reaction. Great. I'm just like testing if you all can get that feature. Perfect. Good. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I am gonna put you all on my other screen. So if you see me looking at totally something in different direction than the camera, I'm just looking at my other screen and looking at you all, okay? So during today's session, here is like outline. I'm gonna give you introduction to what are the arrays or array, and there are 3 problems that we're gonna solve together. So let's get started. So first of all, what is an array? So array is one kind of data structure. So there are different kind of data structure. Array is one of those. It's basically a collection of items, and these items can be anything. It can be integers, strings, numbers, characters, anything. These items are stored in a sequential manner. So they have like indexes starting with 0, and every item is stored on a particular index, but all those indexes are like continuous. So starting from 0 until, depends on how many elements we have in the array. Array index always start with 0. So if you're new to programming, this is going to be very helpful. Array index always starts with 0. And arrays are different depending on different programming language, because it varies a lot. Why do I say that it varies a lot? Because the memory, the storage, it depends a lot on what programming language you are coding. So today I'm going to be using JavaScript. That's something that I am very much familiar with. And I really enjoy coding in JavaScript because it does not restrict you to do something. And that's why I really love JavaScript. I also have like a Java development background, and that's why I have like my own feeling, but it's completely open. Like most of the companies, they allow you to choose your own programming language, like during the coding interview. So totally, if you want to go with JavaScript, you can. If you want to go with other programming language, you can. That is completely open. And today I'm going to be in general talking about like first what are the steps and then doing them in JavaScript, but feel free to use any other programming language that you want to use. So in JavaScript specifically, arrays can hold different types of value. So if I, in my array, if I want to have like number, string, integer, or like number, integer, string, characters, I can make an array from it. But if it's a Java or maybe other programming language, you can only, or different, everyone has their own restriction, but you can only have a single kind of elements in your array. So if you're saying your array is integer, your array should only contain integer numbers. But with JavaScript, your arrays can be anything. Like it can be contain integer plus strings plus characters. And in JavaScript, you don't have to tell your array like how many elements are going to be there in your array. This is totally like your array is dynamically sized in JavaScript. And in other words, basically, you don't have to specify the length of your array. So here is one example. Let's say we have numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have like an extra comma in here. My bad. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there is like a console log statement. So if you all are not familiar with JavaScript, console log is basically more of like a print statement. So it's just going to print. So when I say nums, which is the variable name for my array, of 0, it's going to print 0 because 0 is at the 0 index of my nums array. So do you all remember arrays start with index 0? Now, there are inbuilt different JavaScript method for array. Now, it depends a lot on the programming language. So there are different methods that are available, or built-in method that are available for the array. So you can have array.length, which is going to give you length of your array. You can have .includes method, which is going to check if certain element is included in the array or not. You can have index of method. What it's going to do is it's going to traverse the array and give you the actual index of the element. So let's say if I want to know the index of number 4, I can use this index of method to know what is the index of number 4. You can push. So push is basically when you want to add an element or add an element to an array, then you can use push method. It's going to always add an element at the end using push method. But let's say you want to take out an element from the array, then you can use a method called .pop. But pop is always going to pop out the element at the end of the array. Shift is totally opposite to pop. So pop is going to remove the element from the end of the array. Shift is going to remove the element from the beginning of the array. And unshift is going to add an element at the beginning of the array. And push is going to add the element at the end of the array. So those are different kind of array methods. Now, again, I would highly recommend to just go play around with it, and then you get more sense around what are different methods. And as you practice, you're going to get more sense around it. It's like which one to use when. And as I mentioned, there are many, many more methods out there. Okay, now we're going to dive into our first problem, which is move zeros. So have anybody heard of this problem before? If you have heard, you can give me a thumbs up. Okay, no? Okay, yeah, I see at least a couple of you have heard of this problem before. So let's go through the problem statement and try to understand this problem first. So here, what we want to do is that we have this array, and given an element, given an integer array nums, move all the 0 at the end while maintaining the relative order of the non-zero elements. So let's look at this example. So what they are trying us to do is that we have 0 and then 1 and then 0, 3, 12. We want to move those two zeros, which is at index 0 and index 2, and you want to put it all the way at the end. With the other non-zero elements, we want to make their position as it is. Now here, there is a note. So let's see. Note that you must do this in place without making copy of an array. So you're like, if this note was not there, what we can do is, let's iterate through the array. If there is a 0, we're not going to add it. We're just going to adding all non-zero element. We can just count number of zeros, and at the end we can just push those numbers of 0 there, right? If this note was not there, but this note is there, we want to make sure that we remove this, we actually mutate this original array. We don't want to make a copy of this array. So what we can do there, and if there is only 0, it's just gonna return the same array with 0. Now let's think through this, that how we want to solve this kind of problem. So I always this is very important during this a tip, that during the interview, whenever somebody explain any problem to you, your interviewer, make sure you understand the problem first. Even if it's taking time, it's completely fine. But while you are taking time, make sure you talk. You just try to talk your problems or whatever you're thinking to your interviewer, so they know that where you are coming from, what is your thinking behind it. And if you have questions, and believe me, when a new problem is introduced to you, you might have plenty of questions. So you just go ahead and ask them those questions. What if it's this? What if it's this? Then go ahead and ask them, and they will give you those answers, and those answers will help you to actually structure your problem. And this is very important step. Whenever you understand a problem, there's no need to just go in and necessarily just go ahead and start coding. always take your time and write your algorithm first. An algorithm is basically the steps that you want to take to solve these problems. So for this one, let's say algorithm, let's say I want to take a step 1, what would I do? So for this one, what I'll do is I would first of all, I can count that there are how many like zeros or how many non-zero elements, right? Everyone, like I can count that there are how many zeros or how many non-zero numbers. So let's say, first of all, we want to count. I'm going to go ahead with the route where I'm going to count the number of zeros. So count number of zeros. Second thing, what I want to do is that now I have number of 0. Let me iterate through the array. And while I iterate through the array, if, let's say, if the number is not 0, then, so let's first of all, we want to iterate through the array. And while we are iterating through the array, we want to check if number is non-zero element. Now, if number is non-zero, what we want to do? Do we want to do anything at that point? Everyone? Yeah, no. If number is not 0, we don't want to do anything, right? It just stays as it is. So yeah, if number is non-zero, we don't want to do anything. But so basically, we want to see if the number is 0. So basically, not non-zero, but if the number is a 0 element, then I want to slice that or splice that basically element. So if the number is 0, I'm going to put like if yes, then we want to splice the array. Now, anybody know what splice is? If you know, you can like give me like a quick thumbs up. I see like one of you now. Okay, if you don't know, do you remember I talked about some of like inbuilt method, right? There is a splice, which is the inbuilt array method. What it basically does it removes that specific element or elements, depends on what index you are providing. So it just removes that. And then, so we're going to splice. So what it's going to actually mutate your actual array. So if, let's say we are iterating and we found, okay, it's 0. So what I can do is when I want to splice something, I can say splice from index 0 until index 1, which is only one element, from index 0 until index 1, splice it. So it's going to splice at 0, and then it's just going to move forward. Now, once, or let's say splice the array for that 1, 0 element. Okay. And then once splice is done, at the end, what I'm going to do is, do you remember we counted this number of zeros? We're just going to add those numbers of 0 at the end. So just like add zeros at the end of the array count times. So count is like the initially what we counted. And then the last thing is we want to return the array back. So here we are mutating the original array. We are not making a copy of it or anything. We are actually mutating the original array. Okay, everyone, this is going to be your algorithm. So first thing, when you understand a problem, try to break it down and then write like a small algorithm, and not necessarily during the interview you want to write down an algorithm, but just tell your interviews what are the steps that you are thinking you will do to solve a particular problem. Now, if I write an actual code about this, let me go ahead and write a code. Now, one more thing, make sure you are familiar with writing code in like Google Docs or text files. Because like if you are using IDEs, this is pretty good, but during your coding interview, you will be not given like IDEs. From my Google interview experience, I was just given Google Doc and I have to write like code in it. And it's hard because sometimes you don't remember the method name. Sometimes you don't remember what you want to do. So it's always better to practice that how to write a code without an IDE. Okay, everyone. Okay, give me one quick moment. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and start like writing my code. So first of all, I'm gonna just create this function. So I don't know what happened there. Yeah. It's taking me to the Zoom for some reason. Okay, and I'm gonna write this in a different color, let's say red, just so that it looks different, like it's a code, because sometimes it's hard to read it from Google Doc. So let's say I have a function, move zeros. This function as an argument gonna take some array. Or let's say we want to call this array nums. Okay. So that's my JavaScript function. Again, I'm writing code in JavaScript, but you can feel free, as long as you understand this algorithm, whatever I'm writing in JavaScript, you can use your own programming language to write the same code. So first thing is we want to count how many number of zeros are there. So for this one, what I'll do is I would say let count is our variable, equals nums dot filter. So what filter is an array method, it filter out the array which matches the condition. So I'm gonna say filter num. Num is like an individual element in a nums array. So where num is equal to 0. What this particular line will do is it will return all the elements which are 0, and it returns all of those 0 into an array. And then I can just simply use dot length method on it. So this will give me total number of zeros for my particular count. Now, the next thing, now I have like a number of zeros there. Now the next thing is I want to see if the number is 0, then I want to splice it. If number is not 0, I don't want to do anything. So for this purpose, I can just, you all can use like a for loop or a while loop. It's completely up to like your choice, but there needs to be some kind of looping there. So I'll say while nums dot, and then there is a method called every. So what every method will do is it will check until every number is not equal to 0. Basically, every number is not 0. Until that point, this loop will run. Okay, everyone. So what we are trying to do is we are looping, and we want to run this loop until in the array, all the zeros are eliminated. So here, that's my condition. The next thing, what I'm going to do is here, I would just say like, let's say let I, or basically let's say let index equals. Now here, what I want to do is I want to do nums dot find index. Now find index is an array method that can find an index of a specific number for you. So I want to find index of number where number is equal to 0. So let's say I'm going to take an example, this first one. Okay, so this number is 0, so the index is going to be 0. So when I'll do nums dot, okay, let me just tab over a little. Yeah, nums dot splice index, and then 1. What this will do is it will take the index, which is going to be initially 0, and this 1 now depends on what methods you are using. There is also a method called splice. This is a slice method. So splice method will take from that index how many elements you want to remove from the array. So let's say we only want to remove one element, which is 0, right? Everyone. So we're going to go ahead and remove, we want to remove that 0. So that's why we say splice, it's going to go ahead and remove that 0. Now this loop will run until there is even a single 0 in our array. Okay, now all the zeros has been eliminated. That's when this loop will stop running. At that point, what we want to do, we want to add this many zeros to our array back because we want to add it at the end. So I can just simply take another loop. Let's say let I equals 1. We want to go until I is less than or equal to count I plus plus. Basically, I'm taking a for loop. And at that point, what I want to do is inside this for loop, I just want to push the zeros in. So num dot push, and I'm pushing zeros in. Okay, everyone. And this will add all the zeros there. And at the end, I would say return or the nums, which is my array. So initial array, and we actually mutated the original array. So then I guess say, go ahead and return this array. Okay. Everyone. Perfect. Quick recap. What we did is first we counted the number of 0. Then we checked if 0 is there, we are just removing it from the array. And then we are adding it to the array. So we are not making a new copy. We are working with existing array. Now, have you all heard of something called lead code? Yeah. I would highly recommend that practice it along, right? Because yes, during the coding interview, you're going to write your code into Google Docs or some kind of text editor or even whiteboard, because right now due to COVID, everything is remote. But if it's an on-site an interview, they're going to ask you write code on a whiteboard. So you should be able to like write your code like this and try to explain it, okay? And believe me, if there are some syntax error, they are not going to work. Like they're not going to like reject your candidacy because of that. It's completely fine. You're writing your code on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. So it's fine to have some kind of syntax error, but you should be able to at least utilize the methods that you are thinking of. So I'm using splice. If I misspell splice for some reason during the coding interview, this should be fine, but you should understand what splice actually does. Okay, so that is like just one of the example. Now, going back to my point of lit code, that lit code is very much useful. I'm gonna like open the same problem in lit code. Do you all see my screen with lit code? Like it's like right now it's loading, but let me know. Do you all see it? Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to copy the same code what we did here and try to run it and see if all the test cases are passing or not. Okay, everyone? Sounds good? Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Something else opens. Not that. Let's say copy. I copied, but okay. Hopefully, yeah. And let's just go through it quickly. So when you are using Google Doc, it actually capitalizes all of your first words. So when you are using actual IDEs, those are going to be creating some problems. So just make sure all of these things looks good. We want to find the index. Great. Let's go ahead and like try to run this first. So run code. Perfect. So there is no actual problem at this point, at least syntactically or any kind of error. And let's try to submit it and see if we are passing all the test cases or not. Perfect, right? Everyone good? So just like practice like this, I would recommend you guys go other way around. Start with LeetCode and then write your code in Google Docs. Don't do like the thing that we did. It's just more of a like, I wanted to give you all a little bit idea about how to go about during the coding interview. But if when you are practicing, then try to practice in LeetCode first and then try to do like something in Google Docs or text editor or whiteboarding, anything, whatever you like. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now let's take if there are any questions. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Abhignan. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong.
No, that's fine. It's it's Abhigyan. Yeah. So I have one question. So I'm not that familiar with JavaScript. So what is the time complexity of using splice and find index as a function in JavaScript?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's going to be asked a lot of time in your interviews as well. That what's going to be a time complexity. So for splice, the time complexity, and believe me, I don't remember on top of my head, but it's going to be somewhere n. It depends on how many elements you have, and then n square. The reason why I'm saying n square is because when you remove an element, you want to shift the elements index to the whichever one is above it. So like if I'm removing it from 0, I need to re-index the whole array, right? So it's going to be n squared at that point. That is in the time complexity for splice, and for find index is just going to be n. Okay. Because you're just finding an element. Until you find it, you actually stop. So it's going to be even less than n, but in worst case scenario, it's going to be n.
Okay.
For sure. And that's a very good point. Like whenever you're using a method, even if its time complexity is worst, do not worry about it, okay? But at least know what is its time complexity. And something, even if you're not sure about it, there is totally no need to know everything on top of your head, right? Nobody knows everything on top of their head. So always like try to give your best shot at it. Is like, okay, this is what I think that why it's complex. This should be the time complexity of a particular problem. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If there are none, let's move to our next problem. Ooh. Oh, okay. It added a blank page in. Yeah. Have you all heard of this problem? Something called two-sum? Yeah. Believe me, it's a famous problem. If you have heard of it, great. If you have not, no worries. We're gonna look at it together. So two-sum is a problem, is basically given an array of integer number and an integer target returns two numbers. By adding those two numbers, it's gonna be equal to whatever target has been given to you. So let's look at an example. So there is an array with element 2, 7, 11, and 15, and the target is 9. So it's like, okay, you have these 4 numbers and the target is 9. What numbers you can add to get the target? So we can say, okay, yeah, number 2 and number 7 we can add, and the index of 2 is 0 and index of 7 is 1. So basically index 0 and 1, whatever element at index 0 and 1, when we add those, we can get the target 9. But there are only 4 elements and we are seeing it by ourselves. So we need to write some code to actually do these things for us. Now let's see. There are some notes has given to us. You may assume that each input would have exactly one solution. So that means there are only 2 elements, or there is only one combination of elements, which is going to give you that target. And you may not use the same element twice. So this is an assumption. If it's like target is 6 and there is only 1, 3, and other some elements, but you cannot use 3 twice to make 6. Okay. So those are 2 things. You can return the answer in any order. So it's completely fine if you're returning index 1 first and then index 0. that's totally is something fine. Okay, so that is the problem. There is another example to it. It's like 3, 2, 4, target is 6. So number 2 is at index 1, number 4 is at index 2. So when we add those, we can get the target. Yeah, everyone good? So let's think through this, that how we can solve this. So let's start with like writing this algorithm like we did with our previous problem. So first thing, what we want to do here is, first thing is, there are multiple ways we can solve this. And I'm gonna like give you already a heads up that I'm gonna go the worst route first, and then I'm gonna show you the best solution later, okay? I wanna show you all 2 solutions. The reason is, whenever you're in a coding interview, don't stuck your head is like, I want to give out the best solution. Most of the time, candidates waste their time is like, I want to give out the best solution, and they're not even able to solve that problem. So it's better that you start with what you know, and then they're going to ask you a lot of questions about it. It's like, one is, what is the time complexity? Can you improve the time complexity? Why you're using this function instead of this? Can you use another function? And that's going to make your interview going, and they know that you where is your thinking is, how you are able to solve your problem. So they're going to see your problem solving skills. Okay, so no worries initially about is like, I'm going to give out the best solution there. Try to do your best, but if a worst solution come to your mind, that's fine, just go for it. Just rather than sitting idle or maybe just thinking for the best solution, it's always nice to show what you already know. Okay, so I'm going to go with like one of the not worst, but like a little bit worse solution in terms of time complexity. So do you understand, when there is a loop inside a loop, that's going to be somewhere n squared time complexity, right? So if it's a small array, it's going to be pretty quick. But if it's a big array, at that point, it's going to take a lot and lots of time. So here, one solution that we can do is, sorry, give me one quick minute. Yeah, one solution that we can do over here is, I can start like iterating through the array, and then I can start iterating through the array from the next index and see if the number and the next number is equal to target. I'm going to return those index. If not, I'm not going to return it. So basically my solution is, oops, okay, I don't, it's lagging. Let me go back here. Yeah. Loop through the array, or basically iterate through the array. While I'm looping through the array, or let's say it this way, loop through the array from index 0. Second step, I'm gonna again loop through the array from index 1. So basically from the next index, if, and let's call this like starting from I equals 0, and let's call these j equals 1, if nums, or which is our array of 0, or let's say nums of I plus nums of j, which is like the next index, if both of them are equal to target, then I would just simply return an array with I, comma, oops, not I, comma j. Yeah, and just returning those 2 elements. Very simple solution, nothing too complicated. Now let's try to build this solution there. Okay, so this time around, I'm going to be using LeetCode first, and then going back to like Google Docs, so that you all can see like what's happening there while we are solving the problem. Okay, do you all see my 2-sum problem from the LeetCode? Yeah, give me like a
Yes.
thumbs up?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I hear the yes. Okay. So let's see. This was our algorithm. So I'm going to take this algorithm, just copy and paste it here for our reference so that we can reference it back and forth. Okay. Starting with, let's say we want to start our loop. Let's say for let I equals, we want to start with I, we're going to go until I is less than, nums is our array, so nums dot length I plus plus. And inside this loop, let's say we want to start with first index, and we want to go, again, we want to go until end of the array, which is going to be nums dot length. So where until the index is less than nums dot length, and then we'll just do G++. Okay, yeah. Now, what we're gonna do is we want to check if nums of I plus nums of j, whichever index it is. So we'll see if nums of I or nums of plus nums of j is equal to the target. So if they are equal to the target, I would return an array with I, comma j, comma j. Okay. Now here, one thing about this syntax in JavaScript, if there is only one line after your if, you don't have to have the curly braces. You can just simply do like I, comma j. Okay. Everyone good? Now let's go ahead and run this. So I'm gonna go and quickly first run this, see if it's working or not. Okay, so it's accepted, it's running. Now let's try to submit it. I have done this problem multiple way. Okay, I get one wrong problem. Let's see what it is. So it's saying 10 for number 10, since 5 and 5 are there, what my program is currently doing is it's just returning index 1 and index 1. So here comes part, like this, like some of the questions like interview asked, what is the problem is like that. So here it should return, because you'll remember that one note here, that you may not use the same element twice. And currently my solution is using same element twice. That's why it's returning same index. So basically when my index I and index j both are same. So here there is a quick twist that I'm gonna do. Instead of starting my j with 1, I'm gonna start with I plus 1. So whatever is index or whatever is value of I wanna start with the next index of it. And let's see if we're going to solve this problem or not. So let's run this first. Okay, good. Let's try to submit and see if it works. Perfect. It works. Yeah. Everyone? Good. So just a small change. So even though you started something differently, but then you're like, oh, there's a question, just try to think through this, that how we can solve it. Now, coming back to my point about time complexity, there is a loop inside a loop. So it's going to take like n squared time complexity, and plus, like right now is just an if condition. So this is fine. But let's say there is another like slice or a pushing to an array or elementing an element from the array. It's going to take a lot more time. So to improve this, your interviewer might ask, okay, so tell me how you can improve it. So here, I'm going to show you all like another one solution, what we can do. So I'm going to first comment this out. I'm going to quickly write my algorithm over here, and then I will paste it later on our Google Doc, that what we can do. Have you all heard of something called an hash or hash map? Yeah, no. Yeah, I see like one of you is good. Okay, if you not have heard of something called hash map, have you have seen something like, let's say A is 10, B is 20, something like this kind of data structure? Yeah. Perfect. So basically where you have key and value pairs, right? That is basically what hash or hash map is all about, that you can have a key and value of data structure. Now, how or what kind of algorithm I'm going to use there is that I'm going to create a hash. What I'll do is, first of all, I'll iterate through the array. So we're going to at least require one loop that we're going to iterate through the array. Then we will check if whatever number that we are iterating through it, if it exists in, or let's say, if we distract that number from the target and whatever the remaining number is, if it exists already in our hash, then we found our indexes. If not, then we have not found our indexes. So let me write this down. Okay, so first of all, again, we want to loop through the array from index 0. While we are looping through the array, we're gonna check if our hash, I'm just gonna call it like combination, or you can call it whatever you want to call it, but basically, or let me just call it hash. So if our hash has that value, or basically has that or let's say if our hash has the value or the element where we are iterating through the array, then we want to make sure that that number of combination or basically, let's say if the number is already in there, then I want to see if the remainder is exactly the same or not, right? So we want to see if the remainder is exactly same or not. And then if it's same, then we're going to add it to our hash. So let's backtrack a little what we did so far. So first of all, we're going to loop through the array from index 0. We're going to check if has that element or not. And we will add the element to the hash when, or whatever the reminder, we always add it to the hash. So let's say, or not reminder, but remaining value to the hash. And if we found exactly same value, or basically that key in hash, then return the index. Okay, now let's look at through within an example so that it makes a little bit more sense. So let's start with this example, the example that they have given to us, which is 2, 7, 11, and 15. So let's say 2, 7, 11, and 15. So for this one, we will start with, we are iterating over the array, and the first element is 2. So we'll check that is 2 exists initially in the hash. So initially our hash is going to be an empty hash. So okay, so there is no value in the hash right now. So what we're gonna do is, if I remove like 9, which is our target, so 9 minus 2, it's gonna give me 7. So I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna put 7 as my key, and as in value, I'm gonna put index of 2, which is gonna be 0. Now I'm gonna go to my next index and I'll see, which is 7. Oh, does 7 exist in my hash? Yes, it does. The key, we just previously added it. Okay, so it exists. I'm just gonna return those 2 indexes there. Okay, everyone, let's look at the code and then we'll take some questions. So I'm gonna start with, let's say, let nums hash equals new. Now in JavaScript, a hash is basically, we just call it like a map, but you can call it hash, or in different programming language, there are so many different things that can be called. So you can create a hash using new and then map, or there are multiple ways that this can be done. In JavaScript, there is also a different concept called object. Object, like if I take you to like object-oriented programming language, you might have so many instances of how to do things. But basically, object in JavaScript is a key and value pair, and it works similarly like hash, not exactly like hash, but similarly. And it's going to serve the purpose what we want to do right now. So I'm just going to quickly check an object and just do this real quick. So let's say we have let nums object equals object, which is initially empty. Now let's start with looping through the array. So let I equals 0. I is less than nums dot length I plus plus. So that's my loop. And here, now the first thing, I would check if nums object of current whatever the number is. And one thing, what I want to check, if it exists and it's greater than 0, because we want to take two numbers to meet the target. Then if it exists and it's greater than 0, then I would go ahead and return nums object. Yeah, I need to return an array. So nums object of nums I, basically the index value and the index which we are currently on it. So num of I. Perfect. And then if it does not exist, which is initially, that's not going to be the case. So at that point, what we want to do is, oh my bad, we just want to return the index, not the number. So I, and initially that's not going to be any kind of number inside our object. At that point, we just want to do nums object as a key. What I want to add is I want to add target minus numbers of I, so whichever is the remaining value, and as a value I'm going to adding index there. Okay, everyone. And just for our own understanding, I'm going to console log this nums object for us so that we can see it together. Okay, so if there are some confusion, we can work towards it. So let's go ahead and run the code. Let's see. Okay, I get some. Let me see what's going on. Am I missing something? I'm gonna run this. Sorry, run this one more time. I should have just like pop up the thing. Let me see. Oh, my bad. I just forgot my S. It's always like those small things. Let's run this. This should run. Perfect. So it's running right now. And if you all see this output, it's just basically initially that's what the object is. I should have put my object or my console log here so you all can see what it is before the return value. Okay, now let's see what this is. Okay, it's saying nums object is, my bad. Again, spelling thing. But let's go ahead and run this quickly. Perfect. Do you all see? That's what my object is all about. So it's gonna distract it from or subtract it, not distract, but subtract it from the target. And then whatever the remaining value, it's gonna put it as a key and the index as in value. And always for the next value, it's gonna check. If the value exists, it's just gonna return the current index and whatever index is stored for that value. Okay, everyone, let's submit this and let's see if we pass all the test cases for this one or not. Okay, it's running. It should be quick. Okay, now it's saying, I think I should comment this console log. Let's run this. Perfect. Do you all see, because of the console log, it was taking like a longer, but do you all see the time difference between the first approach and the second approach? 219 versus 68, right? Everyone, do you get my point? Like sometimes all the solutions, it's going to be right, but they're going to ask you like, what is the difference there? Like, can you make it a little bit more faster or something like that? So there's nothing wrong with the first solution, except it's a lot of time consuming, but the second one is going to be just a little bit faster, or a lot faster, not a little bit, a lot faster. Okay. Any questions? Okay, let me see if there are any questions in the chat or, okay. We're gonna take like 10 more minutes. We started like 5-6 minutes late, but we're gonna take 10 more minutes and go through our last problem, which is gonna be a number island problem. Have you all have seen this problem before? Yeah. Okay. This problem has been asked in so many of FAANG interviews. So if you all don't know what FAANG is more for like, or FAANG actually stands for like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Netflix. So that's FAANG, all like big companies. So this interview, this question has been asked in so many of the interviews. So that's why I'm gonna like pay a little bit of attention. First of all, you have to like understand the problem. And then I'm going to give you like a little bit tip or a cheat at the end, that there are so many similar kinds of problems. But let's start with this. So you have given 2-dimension array. So that means arrays of array. That's what you have given. And every array value is either 1 or 0. 1, that means it's a land. 0, that means it's an water. Return how many number of islands. So the concept of island is basically a land which is surrounded all the sides from the water. So an island is surrounded by water, and it's formed by connecting adjacent lands horizontally or vertically. You may assume all 4 edges of the grid are surrounded by water. So basically they are saying all of these are surrounded by water. Okay. Let me see if I can annotate and draw. Perfect. Do you all see if I annotate, I just put like a line there? Yeah. Give me like a thumbs up if you see like a blue line that I put it on the dock. Perfect. So for the first example, this is the array that is given to you, and you need to return how many number of islands are there. And for this one, it's 1. So how it is 1? Because this is in one island and it's surrounded all the sides by water, right? Everyone, good. Let's go for the, oh, I think I did the wrong example there. Let me go a little bit down. Yes, this is the third one. This is like an example of our previous problem. For this one, oh, I forgot to annotate. Let's say clear, draw again. Okay, so for this one, the output is 3. How the output is 3 is because we are drawing, I'm going to show you all. This is our first island. This is our, oh, my bad. This is our first island. This is our second island, because all the way it's surrounded by all the zeros, and zeros are water. Give me one quick moment. Let's do this. Okay, and I'm gonna do this again one more time to show you all that why at least we need to get like 3 islands there. Okay. For some reason, it's not giving me that cursor to draw. Okay, hopefully now it should give me that cursor to draw. Okay, never mind. I think I'm getting some difficulties there to get my cursor here. Never mind, but let's get started to more of like an algorithm side that how we want to solve this problem. So here, again, what we want to do is we want to start with like this our first element, and then we want to check what are other 4 elements. If any of the element is 1, then for that element, we want to again check all the 4 elements. And the element that we already visited, we don't want to visit those elements again, right? Everyone, once we visited the element, there is no need to visit that element again. So in that case, when we already visited an element and we don't want to visit that element again, how are we going to identify? So what we're going to do is we're just going to replace it with 0. So for this one, let's say we start with 1. We're going to check all the horizontal or the vertical ones. So, okay, so like here it has a 1 in the horizontal line. So we're going to go to the next element. For that element, we're going to check if there is a 1 or not until we found a 0. Once we found a 0, we're not going to go further. So there are 2 things that comes place for this specific problem. And those things are, have you heard of something called DFS? Yeah. So DFS stands for depth first search. It's like if you, we're gonna later on have one more session on graphs. So that's where DFS comes more in a place. But basically DFS is more of a like, it's searching through the depth. And also one more concept that's gonna come here in place, it's something called recursion. So have you heard of recursion before? Yeah, no. Okay, recursion is when the function calls itself. That's what recursion is all about. So we're going to use those 2 things, DFS and plus recursion, when the function calls itself. So how we want to get started is, let me first quickly write this algorithm. First thing is what we want to do is we want to find what is the length of whole grid, and then what is the length of the individual element from the grid. So basically the length of the whole array and also the length of the individual array inside an array. So length of grid and also length of grid of 0, and 0 is basically length inside the array. Now we want to also find out the number of islands. So initially number of island is going to be 0. Yeah. And then let's get here. Yeah. Once we do this, we're going to start looping. Now for this problem, the minimum time complexity is going to be n squared. The reason is it's a 2-dimension array. So you have to have a loop inside a loop because you want to loop your first array. And then there is also an array inside an array. So you want to loop the second array. So the minimum time complexity is going to be an n squared. So here we're going to loop array, or let's say loop through array and loop through grid of 0. And I'm gonna, instead of array, I'm just gonna call it grid. Grid is basically the input that is given to us. Once we loop through this, what we want to do is we're gonna make a function called DFS. And what this DFS function will check is, DFS function will check if number is less than 0, what it's basically the length is outside of this grid's index. So if I is less than 0, let me put these things here, or I is greater than grid dot length, or either it's less than 0 or it's greater than 0, or let's say grid of I is 0. In all the case, we want to move on with our loop. But if none of this is true, basically it's the number 1, then we're going to check all the 4 numbers that are surrounded by it. So then we're going to check all 4 elements surrounded by current. So let's say if this, then this. If not, then this is what something we want to do. Okay. And we're going to go until the end. Now, if everything is done, we are done with that array, then we're going to return 1, and that 1 is going to be added to this number of island. And at the end, depend on how many times we return that 1, we're going to return number of or num of Iceland. Okay, so that's our algorithm. That's how we're going to structure it. Now let's go ahead and start coding this problem. Okay, so let me quickly open the lead code link here. Okay, it is perfect. So grid is an array. Now let's go ahead and start solving this. So I'm gonna go and copy our algorithm over here so that we can reference to it back. Okay, starting with, first of all, what are the things we want? So let's start with initially num of island is 0. So initially it's 0. Now let's say let m, which is going to be grid dot length. We want to take the length of grid. N is equal to grid of 0, basically this array. So grid of 0 dot length. Now we got this. In JavaScript, you don't have to worry about those semicolons. If you want to put it, you can. If don't, no worries about it. Now we're going to start with iterating through it. So let's say let I equals 0. I is less than m I plus plus until basically I is less than m. And again, we need to take another loop. So let's say let j equals 0, where j is less than n, which is grid of 0 dot length, j plus plus. And here, what we want to do is we say if grid of I comma j, again, if it's only 1, when it's 1, it's a string 1, so I'm just going to use 2 equal to. So in JavaScript, it's 3 equal to, it's going to check if it's number or not, or basically it's going to check the data type. 2 equal to, that means it's just going to check the value, not the data type. So if it's 1, only in that case, I want to do num of or basically the variable that we created here, plus equal. And do you all remember we want to create that DFS function? This is very important. The tip over here is once you know how to create this DFS function, you can apply it to so many problems, like so many of them. So I'm going to show you how we're going to create that. But the piece of information that we're going to need for this is grid, I, and J, like current index of the grid and current index of grid of the index. Okay. And then at the end, we're going to return number of island, whatever the number of island is. Now let's create this helper function all the way here. You can create it whenever you want to, but let's see. Const DFS. This function expects three things right now, which is grid, I, and J. Now, what in DFS function we want to do is, do you all remember are this condition? So first of all, we want to check if I is less than 0. That means it is outside of the grid. On this side, it's outside of the grid. Second condition is if I is greater than grid dot length. Again, the same thing. It's going to be outside, but on this side of the array, basically outside of the grid. We want to do the same thing for our J. So, or J is less than 0, or J is greater than, I should say greater than or equal to, and grid of I, or I can just say grid of 0 dot length. And last part of this is if grid of I comma J, if that is 0, in all of these cases, we want to return 0. Okay. So in all of these cases, we want to return 0. Now, none of this case, basically it's a 1 and it is inside the array or inside the boundaries. At that point, it's a 1, but we don't want to visit that 1 again. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply change that 1 to 0 because we already visited it once and we don't want to visit it again. So I'm just going to say because we don't want to revisit it. That's why I'm just putting it a 0. You can put -1, anything, but that is not 1. Okay, we just want to make sure that we don't visit this. And if it's 1, we already changed the value of 1 to 0. And then we want to do all 4 elements surrounded the current element. So for that one, now we're going to use recursion. So recursion, that means I'm going to function call itself. So I'm again going to call DFS. But this time, I'm going to passing the same grid. But I'm going to say I plus 1, comma J. Basically, I'm passing the very right element or the next right element there. That is 1. The second is, I'm going to say I minus 1. That means the left element to the current element. That is our second. Fourth is this time, I remains the same. J plus 1. That means the element that is bottom to the current element. Or J minus 1. That means the element which is above the current element. And then I would just say return 1. Okay, so we are visiting all the other 4 elements and we're going to visit until we get that 1 or we can find that 1. Or until we found all the zeros that are surrounded and then we're going to just return 1. It's like we are done with 1 island. Now we can move to the next one. Okay. Yeah. Let's test this. Okay, I get some error, and it is again speed typing and spelling error. So running this one more time. Okay, this runs completely fine. Let's try to submit this, and perfect. Do you all see? It runs completely fine. So again, going through real quick, what we did is we are iterating through the array, or we are looping through the array. And while we loop through the array, as soon as we found one, for that one, we're gonna see other four, what are the other four elements until we found at least one element, which is one, we are good to go, and then we don't have to worry about it. Okay, everyone? Good? Questions?
I have one question. So
Yeah.
in this case, we changed the array in place, right? Like we made some changes to the input array. So should we ask the interviewer first, like that's something which we want to do, or like?
I would say it. I would start it this way, and then let's say interviewer asks you is like, oh, I don't want you to change the actual array, then go ahead and do something about it. The only reason is you can also ask this initially if that is the first thought that comes to your mind, but you can always say, I would like to replace it. The reason is they can see that you are thinking that you want to replace it with something. But when you started it this way, and in meanwhile, you are at the end and you're like, oh, I am replacing the actual array. Do you want me to keep it as it is? And then just throw them on their own. But once you show them that you know that this is how you are not revisiting it. Okay, but that's, yeah, for sure, that's a good question to ask.
Okay.
And that makes me wonder if you all like, we are changing this to 0. What do we don't want, but we don't want to change it to 0. What you can do is at the end, after visiting all of your 4, like the current one, you can just set it back to 1. Exactly. Yeah, you can always do that. And that's pretty easy, but just make sure that you let your interviewer know about it, that you have this point. And this gives you a lot more talking point about your own understanding. So that's a very good point.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Any other question, not necessarily regarding this problem, but regarding any of today's content that we have discussed? Okay. Perfect. So if there are none, let me stop sharing my screen. You all are good to go. It was really nice. I really enjoyed today's session. Like, you all were interacting, so it's really fun for myself. And feel free to reach out. And if you want this Google Docs, I would be happy to share the link with you all. Feel free to reach out to either LinkedIn or my email. I think you can find my LinkedIn on the educators page. Feel free to reach out, and I would be happy to share the Google Doc with you all. And I'm going to put all this solution in the Google Doc. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. See you all later. Bye-bye.